And more women are falling victim to killings by their intimate partners. And last week, 4 Gauteng MECs visited the family of Nomusa Maduna, who was killed by a former partner while she was on her way to work. And the spate of killings coincides with children going missing and some of them found killed. And the incidents have also highlighted shortcomings in the criminal justice system regarding security or securing successful convictions in sexual offences crimes. And joining us in studio to talk more about the subject is MEC for Social Development, Nandi Mayathula-Khoza. Thank you so much, MEC. Good morning to you and thanks for joining us. I mean, we're still observing youth. I think it's a Child Protection Week, which ends today. And then there's also campaigns such as 16 days of no violence against women and child abuse. You know, the spate of, or the brutality and the brazenness and the nature of these crimes in recent years, what do you make out of it?
Indeed, thank you very much. We are really concerned, you know, as public representatives, as government as a whole, that we've really seen a high increase of femicide, you know, killing of young women, especially during the month of April and May. We really need to find out exactly what is it about the month April and May, but also the hijacking, the killing of children, innocent children, in many provinces in our country. As you correctly say, we've just, you know, we didn't really close the Child Protection Week yesterday. We were in Free State, but we said this is the beginning. For the whole year, all of us really have a responsibility to make sure that our children are safe in the families, in schools, where they play, in the playgrounds and everywhere else. So I think it's important really to begin to ask ourselves what goes on in the mind of a perpetrator. What really drives a perpetrator to kill a loved one? What drives a perpetrator to rape a child? So I think it's work that we really need to do, working with the correctional services, the justice system, so that we can then come up with real solutions to this particular problem. Because we've had campaigns.
Yes.
We continue with the campaigns.
Correct.
And the killing continues.
Correct. And then I think in terms of the harsh sentences as well, the success rate of the convictions may not necessarily be a deterrent enough. As you are saying now, victims and survivors have to deal. They have the added burden of having to psychoanalyze what goes through a murderer's mind. At the end of the day, you know, these are supposed to be adults who had been functioning well in society, and then came this trigger, be it a breakup or whatever it is that led to the femicide. Do you think that that is part of the problem, that the convictions or the sentences themselves are not harsh enough to deter this kind of behavior?
Yes, we do say the convictions should be harsh enough, but we welcome some of the convictions, the 32 years, for Karabo Mukwena's killer and other sentences. But perhaps these need to be harsher, because even after the 32 years sentence of Karabo Mukwena's killer, there has been killings of more young women in our country. But I think most importantly for us as well, we know that we are a patriarchal society. So unless we combat patriarchy in our country, in our province, in every spaces where we find our young women and children, you know, the unequal power relations between women and men, between boys and girls, we really need to work on that. But also the issue of unemployment in our country, poverty, inequality, because if you look at the case of the late Nomsa Mbuyisa, we are informed that the boyfriend was not employed. And that's not a justification for him to kill the ex-girlfriend. He wasn't employed. He depended on her for years and years and years. You can imagine what goes on in his mind. As you know, I mean, men have the ego to say, I need to, they've been told by society that they need to work, they need to take care of their families. But if they can't, you just begin to wonder what happens.
So the toxic masculinity, and you're saying that general misogyny, in the sense that there is almost this hate towards women, especially if you are empowered, you're independent, and you have your own personal agency in what you like and you do not like. In such an intimate relationship where one partner feels threatened, we always say, speak out about it, try and seek help, restraint, etc., and it still results in deaths. I mean, is it something that could have been prevented? I know that hindsight is a perfect science, but in your view, how do we prevent other families from going through this pain?
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the case of Nomsa Mbuyisa, the case was reported almost 4 or 5 times to the police, and apparently nothing happened, and apparently the dockets kept on disappearing. So I think there is something that needs to be done in the system, in the justice system itself, especially with the South African police when the cases are reported and are not dealt with. The families are aware, and families must always be aware. The young women, the girls must always talk about what they are going through in their relationships. And of course, if there's a sign of gender-based violence, signs of this man, likely to killing the girl or the child, something needs to be done. We have shelters, for example, at social development, also community safety, where women see that, this relationship is really abusive and it's unhealthy, it's poisonous. They need to go to those shelters. They can talk to any social workers in the community, and they can be shown where the shelters are so that they can be protected, and also they can, prepare for a future life even without the toxic relationship.
Yeah. And MEC, I mean, this is also across the board in terms of in income levels. It's not just a classist issue around the unemployed, primarily of a particular demographic. We've seen femicide even in the highest level of affluence, and we've seen it also happening in the lower strata. So it is a cultural, it seems like almost a second nature, if you will. There was the issue around rape in universities, where they call it, even term it, a rape culture, like it's some of the induction that we have. It speaks of a very sick and broken society. Absolutely, and it is the responsibility of all of us to deal with this society, having this culture of doing whatever men want to do with their partners, but it also brings in the need for the men themselves to stand up and to say, not in our names. These men, these perpetrators can't really continue to do this, because it really brings about a very negative image about all men in South Africa, whereas we know that not all men are actually perpetrators. So we are happy to see organizations such as Kulumandota, the Men's Forum, the Sonke Justice, organizations that are beginning to go into these spaces that are likely, for our young women to experience gender-based violence, the colleges, the universities, the schools. We are also going into the schools as well. We're visiting them, we're talking to the girls, and I tell you, girls, we leave girls crying, which just simply tells you that the problem starts at home. It's in society, it's at school, and it's everywhere. So all of us really, this blaming syndrome that I see, that what is government doing? What are you doing? But people must ask themselves, what am I doing really to address this particular sketch of gender-based violence in society? I mean, the body count is piling up, and it's difficult to keep up as to which particular case. I mean, the social media has now made it even more accessible, where women have used that as a form of refuge, and saying that if anything were to happen to me, my husband should be the first suspect. If anything, living in fear in that kind of environment where there's also the threat of harming your children and not necessarily having an outlet or where to go. We've seen the case of a woman who was on her way to work, being dragged out of a taxi and being shot in full view of everybody in broad daylight. I mean, these are things that are only, you would think, happens in fiction or crime and investigation movies or series. How do you even attempt to deal with something like that? It's very, very difficult, I must say, and hence we are saying that everybody has a responsibility, and, beginning with the family. The family, I think we see families in South Africa where not all families are strong. And once you don't have strong families, you're not going to have a strong society. You're not going to have men and women in police, those who are responsible, for law enforcement, doing their work effectively. So each and everyone who has a role to play on gender-based violence, but ordinary South Africans really need to take their part. We are, as we speak, strengthening families, so that families must know what goes around in the family and be able to address those issues. But we also, as Gauteng province, have launched a campaign. We call it Invest in a Young Woman, Empower a Girl Child, so that all young women, all girl children in our society are aware
what is happening, but that they are vigilant, but also that indeed the identity, the self, knowing who you are, knowing that you can say no. But sometimes, yes, we do find young women and girls in a situation that is out of their control. But these are some of the aspects of our campaign that we are dealing with. And we're calling upon everybody to be involved in these campaigns.
And we're not saying that women do not perpetrate crimes or do not murder or do not have that inclination to kill, be it in self-defense or for whatever other reason. But in the main, it is the men that perpetrate these kind of crimes. So do you think that also the focus on empowering women has somehow left our male counterparts, vulnerable, excluded, marginalized, and perhaps that's why we're seeing that maybe they're emasculated. They don't have the basic tools to be able to adjust in a society that is now advancing women.
Yeah, I agree, but there's no justification for anybody in this country to kill somebody else. But yes, when we do these campaigns, we are therefore beginning to say that as we focus on girl children, we should also focus on boy children. That's why when we visit the schools, we don't only engage and dialogue with the girls, but we would also have the male counterparts, but also us engaging and dialoguing with the boys so that they can also learn that the issue of equality in our country is very important. Them protecting girls is also very, very important. When we deal with young women, we don't only look at young women, but we also address the young men as well. And that's why I appreciate all those men's forum who are doing work. Even Karabo Mukwena's uncle has started to do work with the boys, mentoring, coaching boys to become responsible men, but also ensuring the issue of equality. Yes, some men will make use of the excuse to say that, oh, my woman is now more empowered, she's earning more than I do, or she's employed, I'm not employed. But that's not justification enough to kill somebody.
And I mean, in maybe in a sociopath's mind, and I mean, I'm no psychologist, but do you think that also the prospects of being significant or prominent, because if all your life you didn't have anything notable that you can say as a man you've achieved, you're dependent on a woman for your finances and basic amenities, that once that sort of lifeline goes away in the community, you've now lost your sense of significance or prominence, that with the killing in itself, it gives you some level of fame in a twisted mind's, sociopath. Do you think that could possibly be?
Absolutely, that could possibly be, and that's why you raise a very important issue of harsher sentences, so that when they begin about thinking of killing somebody, they think about, I'm going to spend my life in jail. But that's what goes on, and also hence the importance of really empowerment of all sexes in society. Yeah.
And your workshops, do they touch, and I know for families that are watching now who you may have visited, it's very little consolation, because now we're analyzing and debating this matter post, any intervention that could have saved their loved one. But you also, in the empowerment, if young people see a culture of violence in the home, they emulate what they perceive to be love or to be control, or, what we potentially would say, it's cultural as well. Snip up and flays, all of that kind of cultural nuances. Do you think that also perpetuates the violence?
Yes, it's about socialization as well. Yes, it's about watching these things happen. You see your mother being beaten every day, or even being killed. A case in point, Nomsa's child witnessed the killing of the mother, being dragged out of the taxi, the public, in full view of the public. And this child says, when he's asked, what are your goals? He says, I want to die, because of what he has actually seen. So it's about what happens in the home, hence the importance of family interventions, family empowerment. But also in that family, it's also about socialization. It's high time that we change the way we socialize our girls and boys at home, so that boys also should not grow up thinking that, they are superior to girls. The little things that we do, we buy dolls for the girls, we buy guns and cars and, for the boys. So those little things, we need to be aware of the chores at home, You know, we make girls to cook, to wash dishes, and boys will be playing outside. So these are the little things that we really need to look at as a society.
Yeah, and I mean, the community, the whole adage that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And you know, people have had their own fair share of strife and hardship.
Yeah.
That may have been eroded. The care and empathy that we used to have. If you hear screams from your next door neighbor, you would go and intervene. You know, the father of that, the next door neighbor would go, or there'd be community policing forums.
Yeah.
So while all of this is taking place, where is the vigilance? Where is the care, compassion, and empathy from community members?
No, absolutely. I mean, that village is no longer there. If the village is there, and girls were saying, but if that village is there, it is not safe at all. My own uncle at home, my own cousin at home, we no longer trust them. They're no longer safe, right, in their home. So we need to bring back what we really experienced when we were growing up. You know, the mother was next door, the father was next door was my mother, my father, not necessarily biological, something that is no longer there. So we need to bring back that spirit of caring, you know, for each other, protecting our vulnerable members of society, so that we together can own up patriarchy and deal with it and combat it, but together combat gender-based violence in society. So that spirit of caring, that spirit of love, but also that spirit of respect for each other, you know, those positive values that we used to have, we need to bring them back and ensure that, I mean, if we love each other genuinely, really, you would see less and less hatred, even hatred for people who are, you know, different, you know, sexually different, sexually orientated. You've seen girls in Soweto being killed because they are gays. So we need to dialogue in society about these things so that we understand our constitution, the rights of people, and we respect those rights, so that I'm sure in that way we'll see, you know, the decrease of gender-based violence in society.
Yeah, is it more prevalent now, or is it because of the advent of social media that it is much more visible, and therefore it would spark the attention of authorities and follow-through?
Absolutely. It is because people are now reporting, but it is also because people know what is happening around them, and therefore they report on social media, they read about it in social media. So we need to be thankful where good work is being done by South African police and by the justice system. But really, there's a need for more work to be done to prevent, because for me, it's about prevention. Yes. We can't wait up until somebody has died. We need to prevent the loss of lives.
How does social development then intervene? As you were saying that unfairly so, people would have a higher expectation from government officials to deal with socio-economic issues, albeit that the femicide or gender-based violence takes place behind closed doors in the privacy of people's homes, and the police will only know after the fact, once there is a body, etc. How does social development evaluate, monitor, make sure that you're on the ground to report these matters?
Yes, absolutely. We do have a campaign, and this is like a permanent, a very long-term campaign where there are various you know, pillars that we are working on. The issue of education for both boys and girls. And this is, you know, the Department of Education working with social development, ensuring that our girls and boys are nurtured, are educated, and they are ready to go to tertiary institutions. But secondly, the issue of safety, community safety, social development, working with community safety. We have our social workers, we have our auxiliary social workers, our forensic social workers who are monitoring what is happening in families, in society. But I'm sure they don't reach all families, and that's why we need more social workers, more forensic social workers, so that they can be able to even do door-to-door and assist those families who are experiencing these problems. We speak about social development working with health. We speak about the fact that the girl children from the age of 15 to 24 are amongst those who are actually, there's prevalence of HIV and AIDS amongst them, which actually tells you that, and it's less in as far as boys are concerned. So it tells you that there's an issue of blessers, there's an issue of older men really coming for these girls. So we as social development social workers, we come into the space, we empower the women, we empower the boys to protect the girls, etc. But also I spoke about the shelters. Most importantly, we have a program as well, which is called a Tsepo 1 Million program, where we are empowering boys and girls, young women and men, so that all the economic opportunities that are there in our government and social development, they also benefit, they participate. Our welfare to work program, where we have young women who are dependent on their boyfriends, because sometimes because you're dependent on the boyfriend, you don't want to leave this abusive relationship. So they've been empowered, they are now working, they are now having their own businesses. Some are photographers, others are real estate agents, etc., etc. In that way, they say, look, we are now dependent on ourselves. We no longer even are dependent on the social work, on the social grant.
Yeah, and I mean, the others are supposed to be even more difficult to prosecute or even prove. If you take murders that take, a murder for hire, for example, be it because of monetary benefits, be it a life policy or whatever reason. There's another one where, I think it was the Eskom murder case of Yende, who was due to be a witness, a state witness in a particular prosecution matter, and she herself fell victim to that. So these are multi-pronged genocide or a war against women in the country.
Absolutely. As you correctly say, it's multi-pronged. I don't know whether to call it strategies, whatever, what goes on in the minds of the perpetrators. And therefore, it calls for a multi-pronged approach and strategy by society as a whole, so that these perpetrators really don't find space to plan and to do what they want to do. And I mean, the Yende case is a case in point where, I mean, she was killed at work. She was about to be promoted, but a male counterpart who thought, why her and why not me, etc. So that's why also it's important to dialogue, to talk about these issues. Let's get South Africa talking. Let's stop the violence, because the more we are quiet about these issues of gender inequality, of patriarchy, the more we see victims of gender-based violence in society.
And I mean, if you look at the upbringing, you spoke about socialization. I mean, I find that although crime is not just restricted to one area or geography, is the fact that in the townships in the main, it is a conducive environment for violence, albeit that you are the odd kid out who may not necessarily succumb to the boys' advances, and you'd be labeled all sorts of things and names, because of that particular entitlement, if you will, that if a man grabs you or there's a wolf whistle, etc., that you're supposed to find that appropriate. And if you object to it, then there's another level of victimization.
Well, absolutely. These are the stereotypes that we need to deal with in society, because it's really wrong to pat a girl on her bum. What if you do the same thing on the boy or on the young man? How are they going to react to it? But yes, we encourage our girls, our young women to stand up for themselves, to know who they are. And it doesn't give a reason for a man, and therefore to attack that young woman or the girl child who knows who they are, who knows their identity, who are positive, who defend themselves, who are vigilant. It means that the men need to respect that as well. You talk about, if you talk about odd people in society, yes, we have the strong ones, but also we have the vulnerable ones. You speak about children with albinism. They are now scared to even play, with the other children, because they think, wow, somebody's going to come and steal me, and next thing I'm killed. And we see a lot of that happening in society. And that's sick as far as I'm concerned. So we need to talk about it. How do we demystify the myth that albino children are muti, for example, because they are not.
No, I think there's a lot of lies and, things that have, or narratives that have been perpetuated and that still prevail, because, evil will find a way somehow of getting into that space. In case we haven't covered all the opportunities or mechanisms and facilities that the Social Development Department has, just in access, where people may not have computers or smartphones, is there a clinic within walking distance? Is there those kind of auxiliary support systems?
Yes, no, absolutely. In each and every, not necessarily each and every community, but in most of our communities, in the townships, the smallest townships, we do have satellite offices of social workers. So the family members or, the vulnerable people can just walk into that office and report that, look, there's something that's happening. So I'm so uncomfortable about, this particular act of this particular person, so that social worker can actually assist those people to report or to do whatever that will actually prevent this vulnerable person from being killed eventually. So there are those spaces that would like our people to get access to, but of course, the websites that we have, those who have access to the smartphones, but as you say, not everybody has an access to a smartphone. The clinics themselves, there are offices, there are Tutuzela offices where vulnerable people can also go to. The police stations. There are those green doors where our people can just walk into a police station and they will be shown the green door so that they can actually be assisted throughout.
MEC, we thank you so much for your time and your insight. We hope that at least, if nothing else, there's a sense of comfort,
Yes.
that the government cares, the social development is there, and that there is help at hand, that you don't feel isolated. We really appreciate you coming in. We're speaking to MEC for Social Development, Nandi Mayathula-Khoza, talking about their program for government in the spate of the increase of femicide in the country. You're welcome to share with us on Afro Worldview. We're also on online, and you can live stream there. But for now, though, we take a quick break. We'll see you shortly.